cumulative impacts initial meeting for feedback. I'm Jeff Robbins, Chair of the Colorado Oil and Gas Commission. I welcome everyone to this meeting. We have listening in today the commissioners from the Colorado Oil and Gas Commission and certain staff. And we have a wonderful facilitator in Commissioner Brett Ackerman, who will be facilitating the cumulative impacts stakeholder meetings and work group. And with that, I would turn it over to Brett to get us started.
Thank you, Chair Robbins. I appreciate that and appreciate the introduction. And thank you to everybody who has signed up and who is attending today's meeting. And I particularly want to thank you for your preparation for the comments that you make today. By way of introduction, remember that the cumulative impacts topic was discussed during the mission change rulemaking. And while several regulations were implemented that intended to reduce the cumulative impact of oil and gas development at that time, remember the Commission committed to take a more focused look at cumulative impacts in the future. And you might recall that there was a citizen petition by a number of groups in December, and the Commission heard that petition. And it largely focused on air and specifically ozone precursor emissions. And the Commission at that point did not forward the petition, but committed to conduct a stakeholder outreach process beginning in the first part of this year, just on the broader issue of cumulative impacts, as we wanted to hear from anyone who was interested. As a reminder, COGCC, I think most of you are aware, is the agency that's charged with managing oil and gas in Colorado and therefore has the regulatory authority over oil and gas. I think most of you are familiar with the commissioners and staff we have on the call here, but I would like to introduce a couple of other panel members that we've invited to sit in as well. And so if you'll give us just a few minutes, we'll ask the folks from CDPHE and from DNR to introduce themselves. And so if we can start with Kate Fury, please, from CDPHE.
Thank you, Commissioner Ackerman. My name is Kate Fury. I'm the Air Quality Oil and Gas Liaison, and I'm housed within the Community and Partnership Development Program in the Air Pollution Control Division. I lead coordination between division and COGCC staff, and I'm also the main point of contact for stakeholders that are interested in air quality and oil and gas matters. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ms. Fury. And Natalie Eddy as well from CDPHE.
Thanks so much, Commissioner. My name is Natalie Eddy. I'm the Deputy Director for Policy with the Environmental Health and Protection Program within CDPHE. So work across our environmental divisions, which includes air, water, waste, and environmental health. Great to be here this morning. Thanks.
Thank you so much, and thanks for being here. And would like to give Mr. Aaron Ray a chance to introduce himself, maybe for the first time to some of you.
Thank you very much. My name is Aaron Ray. I'm the new Assistant Director for Energy Innovation at the Colorado Department of Natural Resources. I actually haven't started yet, but I will next week. I come to DNR from the National Conference of State Legislatures, where I led NCSL's energy program, and I previously served as Deputy Director for Policy in the Colorado Governor's Office of State Planning and Budgeting. I appreciate being included in this listening session. I look forward to hearing your views. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are thrilled to have Mr. Ray with the state and with us here. I did want to just make a couple of remarks before we get started, and wanted to remind people, talk a little bit about the procedure and a little bit about decorum. I wanted to remind everybody that this meeting is specifically to introduce cumulative impacts topics that you would like the Commission to consider during its cumulative impact stakeholder process. And so if you would like to comment on a specific OGDP or CAP or other issue, it would be helpful if your comment was given during the appropriate time and appropriate hearing. And hearings manager Mimi Larson, who's on the call, can help get you in the right place if that's the case. However, if you believe the points that you are raising are helpful to the cumulative impacts overall discussion, please absolutely feel free to share them here. Ultimately, issues that will be considered are issues that will be within COGCC's purview and mission, and are consistent with Senate Bill 19-181, and that are reasonably actionable in nature. I wanted to remind everybody that it's not the intent of these meetings to debate or discuss or argue for or refute the merits of any of the issues that are raised, but rather simply to ensure there's an avenue to raise and describe the issues that are important to you for inclusion in the process, along with any substance that you'd like to provide. We'll give you each roughly 3 minutes for your principal presentation. If you need a little more time, that's okay. We don't want to stifle anyone. Also wanted to let everyone know that we are recording these meetings. Certainly, we'll be taking notes and we'll have a recording of this meeting going forward. I find it helpful always to remind everybody, certainly let's be respectful of the thoughts of others. Personal attacks of others or allegations of negligence or malfeasance aren't appropriate or effective in getting issues included. As well, at least in this commissioner's opinion, they generally demonstrate a lack of substance in one's own argument. As such, I'd respectfully ask you to refrain from that, as well as refrain from addressing, debating, or refuting points that are raised by other commenters at this time. The time to debate the substance of these issues will definitely come in this process. At the end of each public comment, panelists will be given an opportunity to ask any clarifying or follow-up questions that they might have about your presentation. So with that introduction, I also would note Director Julie Murphy is here on the call with us as well. Thanks for being here, Director Murphy. And we'll go ahead and jump right into the public presentations. We have 9 people who signed up today, and we are thrilled to get an opportunity to listen to you. And we're going to go ahead and go in the order of folks as they signed up. And so that would put as our number 1 speaker, Kate Merlin from Wild Earth Guardians, who was, I might note, a principal representative of the petition that was brought forward to the commission in December. So I believe we are elevating Ms. Merlin. Ms. Merlin, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Can you hear me?
We sure can. Please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you. I just have brief comments this morning. Thank you very much, commissioners, for holding these public stakeholder scoping meetings. I appreciate your honoring your commitment to get to work quickly on these rules. I understand the commission is looking for input on what should be included in the cumulative impacts rulemaking. I want to urge the commission to include but not limit the rulemaking to the items identified by Wild Earth Guardians, 350 Colorado, and 4 other groups in our cumulative impacts petition, which led to this stakeholder process. In our petition, we focused on air impacts, particularly on ozone impacted, climate impacted, and disproportionately impacted communities. But cumulative impacts are so much broader. I'll let other groups who plan on speaking fill in specific substantive areas, but for me, water consumption, waste disposal, including wastewater disposal, seismic hazards, and habitat fragmentation are at the top of my mind. I also implore the commission to pay special attention to process in these rules. The state cannot afford to allow important decisions to be made on low quality data. What we've seen so far in the self-reported cumulative impacts, data is just its absurdity, impossibility reported as fact. It's necessary but not sufficient for the commission to revise cumulative impacts data after site-specific decisions have already been made. The rules need to do so much more to demand the highest quality data at the earliest stage of project proposal. We've seen the federal government has been analyzing foreseeable impacts for site-specific projects for decades. It's not only possible to develop site-specific cumulative impacts analysis, it is necessary to protect public health, safety, and welfare, and it's required by Colorado statute. I wish the commission the best of luck in working forward on these rules. I look forward to remaining engaged in this process, and I thank you again very much for holding these public scoping comments.
Thank you, Ms. Merlin, and thank you so much for your continued engagement in this issue. We very much appreciate it. It's great to see her this morning. From our panelists, do we have any follow-up questions or comments for Ms. Merlin? Commissioner McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Merlin, for being here today and kicking us off. Seems appropriate. I'm unsure. I think you made a comment about you want something about seismic. Sorry, could you clarify that and why you might be concerned about that or what we would be measuring?
Yes, thank you very much, Commissioner McGowan. So the way that we read cumulative impacts are not simply cumulative to oil and gas development. They are cumulative on existing conditions on the ground. So for example, the ozone non-attainment area in the Front Range is not solely due to oil and gas. There are other contributing factors, but the fact of ozone non-attainment should be considered when considering adding additional pollution. Likewise, in areas that already have great natural seismic hazard we believe that it is a cumulative impact that should be considered when permitting additional seismic operations or seismic impacting operations in that vicinity.
Thanks.
Thanks for the clarification, Ms. Merlin. Any other comments, questions for Ms. Merlin?
I had a question.
Please.
You mentioned you expressed a concern around the quality of data, and I wondered if there are particular areas where you'd like to see different kinds of data or things maybe we aren't accessing.
Thank you, Ms. Eddy. I'm not really sure where you would mean where the data should come from. In the federal context, the federal government is the one doing the data analysis. In Colorado, we allow the operators to provide their own cumulative impacts data. And I do think that it needs to be something considered by the stakeholders, whether that's appropriate. And if that is appropriate, what guardrails need to be put in place on data quality. So for example, if an operator is allowed to provide a number and say, we don't foresee emitting any VOCs as a result of our operations, and then however facts on the ground lead to the determination that VOCs actually have been emitted, what are the implications of that? Are there consequences for having, told the commission that there would be no VOCs? Important decisions were made on permitting that project based on that statement that there would be no VOCs emitted. And then if that ends up not being true, we believe that there should be some sort of consequence. So one idea would be to have the cumulative impacts data reported by the operator be an enforceable limit. So if an operator says that they'll limit their operations to 25 tons per year, that if it's found to be above that amount, I'm just pulling that number out of the air, sorry, it's stuck in my mind. But let's say they report in their cumulative impacts data that they anticipate only emitting 10 tons of VOCs per year, but that's found out later to be not true. There should be some sort of consequence for that, whether that's a fine or penalty or even a reconsideration of that permit, because we have to have good quality data to base our decisions on. So, again, the federal government assures that by doing the data analysis themselves. That is one possibility.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that, Ms. Merlin. And again, appreciate you being here with us today. We'll go ahead and move to the next commenter. If we could elevate Mr. Peter Foote. Thank you. Mr. Foote, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I think there's been a miscommunication here. I don't have any comment to add at this time.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. We have you on the list and it must have gotten there by mistake. So we appreciate that. Thank you. Great. We'll go ahead and move on then to our next commenter, who is Karen Artell. If we can elevate her, please.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
We sure can hear you, Ms. Artell, and you're welcome to visualize if you'd like to, but you certainly don't have to. The time is yours.
Well, I'll just get started on my comments. So thank you, though. My name is Karen Artell. I'm submitting written comments for more detail to my 3-minute comments, which may seem a little bit disjointed. So sorry about that. I'm kind of picking and choosing. Local governments can regulate the surface impacts of oil and gas development, including air emissions and air quality and water quality and source. But we need a statewide effort to address the cumulative impacts of ozone precursors, air toxics, greenhouse gas emissions, and water quality and quantity. I appreciate all the information I can find on the COGCC website that the public can comment on each permit application, and permit applications have a public hearing. I also appreciate the efforts and dedication of APCD staff members, but the APCD current data system and permit process is not quite as transparent as the COGCC's. I think this could be remedied in part by including the APCD oil and gas permit application with the COGCC evaluation and hearing. The consultation process with CPW, both during the permit application review with COGCC staff and CPW presence at application hearings, seems to be better developed than CDPHE consultations. I would like to see CDPHE air and water impact consultations be further developed to include a water quality control division and APCD written consultation for all oil and gas permit applications, which will improve transparency. The reuse of produced water outside of oil and gas operations is of particular concern to me. I'm also requesting that for any approved caps, that the operator should be required to evaluate cumulative impacts for each individual OGDP proposed within the cap. The impacts of air emissions outside of the immediate application lands should be acknowledged, and new permit applications should include a cumulative impacts evaluation of air emissions outside of the application lands to other jurisdictions. For example, Weld County oil and gas emissions and their effects on Larimer County ozone levels. I know study is underway to evaluate the use of produced water outside of oil and gas development, but taking into consideration the chemicals used in oil and gas development and the contaminants in produced water, to me, safe use outside of oil and gas development is questionable. Produced water reuse in oil and gas operations does serve to save fresh water use, which is important considering Colorado and the West drought conditions. I do think that produced water quality analysis should additionally include PFAS sampling. But really, produced water and other E&P waste should not be disposed of in open pits to the waters of the state and agricultural land. So thank you for your consideration, and I will send some written comments too.
Thank you so much, Ms. Artel, for your comments. Nice to have you here with us today. To our panel, any points of clarification with regard to the comments by Ms. Artel? Okay, thank you so much. Thanks again, Ms. Artel, for being here. Let's go ahead and elevate our next commenter, please. Mr. Ben Bao, I think. I see you there, Mr. Bao. Are you able to hear us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, we've got you as well. You're welcome to visualize or not as you see fit, and the time is yours.
Sure, thanks for calling on me, appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ben, and I manage a small environmental consulting team working for operators here in the Front Range. Since the implementation of House Bill 181, we've all been getting used to more stringent regulations in soil and groundwater remediation. However, from the perspective of consultants like us managing these projects on the ground, we seem to unanimously agree that certain actions mandated by the state result in what we perceive as a net negative gain to the environment. This includes excavating thousands of yards of soil with only trace concentrations of hydrocarbons, conducting vast background sampling investigations to prove that certain metals and compounds are representative of background conditions when this fact is widely known, and installing monitoring wells at locations demonstrated to be clean on the sole basis that groundwater is shallow. These extra efforts, especially with excessive amounts of soil being excavated across the state, result in exponentially more truck traffic on the roads and truck miles driven, contributing that much more to emissions of CO2, NOx, diesel particulates, and the inherent safety concerns associated with trucking to local communities. Instead of seeking to remove every molecule of hydrocarbon and trace inorganic compound from a site, we hope that the state will apply more leniency in instances where it can be demonstrated that leaving low concentrations of contaminants in place is less harmful than the cumulative impacts involved in its removal. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Very helpful. Appreciate your comments, Mr. Bao. Again, to our panel, any points of clarification on Mr. Bao's testimony? All right, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Our next commenter is Tom Easley. Mr. Easley, can you hear me?
Yep, I'm getting unmuted and the camera going. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to offer a few comments this morning. I'm with Colorado Communities for Climate Action, and we'll offer a few general comments this morning as well as following it up with written comments. First of all, thanks very much for getting this process going. When we were a party to the emission change rulemaking 2 years ago, we were especially focused on cumulative impacts analysis. And I think we were among those who recognized that what you did at that time was a really good start as far as beginning to gather data on cumulative impacts by way of the CIDR database. But it was there was simply not enough time to follow up on the second part of the directive, and that is to address those impacts. In a way, the CIDR database was a little bit like putting the cart before the horse, because until we get some of the broader issues and know exactly what sort of data we're looking for, it's a little bit premature to consider that being a complete deal. I just wanted to offer a few kind of general observations about what the goals of this process ought to be. And first ought to be reaching a common understanding of the definition of cumulative impacts. We recommend the EPA definition as a starting point. You probably want to tailor that for Colorado's special considerations. Second, we need to agree on the overall scope. Essential is recognizing that cumulative impacts are not just on-site, but must be taken in the context of the overall impact of oil and gas operations statewide. Third is agree on the specific impacts to be evaluated. Certainly that's air quality, hazardous gases, including greenhouse gases, water quantity and quality, wildlife, land use, transportation. And, but there are specific components in each of those topics that we need to agree will be addressed in it. Fourth, as CDPHE's Air Commission and Air Division have recognized, it is critical to build a robust and complete database. They are in COGCC, or pardon me, APCD is in the process now of really improving the measurements of impacts from the oil and gas industry. You ought to be working with them closely on that as a kind of as a model to addressing all the other impacts also. A little bit more on addressing the impacts is we think the starting point should be a pause on granting permits until the cumulative impact rules are worked out. A likely outcome is that there will be permit conditions created as a result of the rules. And until we know just what impact mitigation obligations producers have, granting more permits just exacerbates the problem. On-site mitigation is key, we found in other processes. Getting into alternatives like offsets and trading schemes ought to be the last resort. Certainly on-site mitigation is the preferred route. It can be very complicated with offsets, especially as far as continuing impacts on disproportionately impacted communities. Lastly, enforcement is critical. There ought to be penalties for non-compliance with cumulative impact limits, and critical to that is COGCC must be staffed to then do an effective job of this. I'll wrap it up there. We look forward to participating in the process, and once again, thank you for all of the attention you're giving to it.
Thank you, Mr. Easley, and thank you for your participation in the rulemaking process as well with the mission change. Any points of clarification from the comments made by Mr. Easley? Commissioner Cross.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Easley, I just wanted to confirm, you said for the definitions, you said the EPA definition is what you'd like to see?
It seems to me it should be a starting point. It is pretty complete and well thought out. As I said, you may want to modify it for Colorado's special needs and considerations, but it seems to me like a good starting point.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Cross. Any others? Director Murphy.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm, Mr. Easley, that you're submitting kind of your four or 6 point plan to us in writing. Also, it seemed like a pretty detailed way to walk through a number of the considerations. So great.
Yep, I will be doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? Thank you, Mr. Easley. I appreciate your comments and appreciate your time here today.
Thank you.
You bet. Next, we have a Paul Varoutsos. Hopefully I'm saying that properly, if we can elevate him. Mr. Varoutsos, am I close on your name?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you fine. You got us?
Yes, and that was the exact pronunciation of my name. Thank you very much.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. And please feel free to continue whenever you're ready.
Hi, thank you for your time. My name is Paul. I'm just a resident of the South Shore community in Southeast Aurora with my wife and son. We love the area, and my son is looking forward to attending Altitude later this year. Many people in this area are worried about recent movements for oil and gas operations nearby our reservoirs and their environmental impacts. When it comes to oil and gas operations like fracking, the facts and data are clear. These operations are harmful to the health of those in nearby communities. Companies submitting permits for these operations, like Civitas, love to state that they are following regulations and drilling 2,000 feet away from homes. A 2017 study in the American Economic Review found that well pads drilled within 3,200 feet of a community water system intake increases gas-related contaminants in drinking water. What are these gas-related contaminants? Well, on page 4 of Civitas's own ESG scorecard document published on their website, they admittedly do not fully disclose chemicals used in oil and gas operations to the public because, quote, the identity of some chemicals and their exact concentrations may be protected by confidential business information, end quote. Yet one Cornell study titled Natural Gas Operations from a Public Health Perspective recommended, quote, full disclosure of the chemicals used for hydraulic fracturing and drilling, as many have immediate health effects and many long-term health effects, end quote. Oil and gas companies choose not to fully disclose these chemicals because it might damage their business practices. I interpret this as a prioritization of their bottom line over the health, safety, and longevity of the communities where they drill. I urge the COGCC to require more transparency to the public about oil and gas operation chemicals used, and I urge you to revisit the guideline of 2,000-foot minimums and require wells be located farther away from homes and water sources. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Varoutsos. Appreciate your comments. Any points of clarification? Mr. Cross, or Commissioner Cross, please go ahead.
I can get it unmuted. Thank you, Commissioner. And thank you for your comments today. I do want to note just in particular that last year the legislature passed HB 1348, which talks about chemical disclosures. And that is something that we are currently working on implementing consistent with the legislation provided. And amongst other things, 1348 requires operators and disclosures to submit the chemicals that are used in downhole operations, not just in fracking, but it would also be in things like cement used downhole to be provided, and that will be accessible via the COGCC website. You can look by specific wells, etc. So we do appreciate those comments, and that information will be provided. I will say that there still are some protections for exact trade secrets, so it's not going to display the exact measurements of each chemical, but different chemicals that are used will be disclosed within that. and so I think that's important. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that as well. And thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Cross. Appreciate that. Any other points of clarification? I also wanted to note that our own Hannah Hickam has pasted into the chat box your opportunities for written comments as well. You can do so through the form or through an email address that she's provided here. And as a follow-up to Director Murphy's comments, appreciate those that if you'd like to submit follow-ups, you're not limited to solely verbal comments. Please go ahead and submit any written materials that you would like as well. That said, thank you very much, Mr. Barutsos. Our next commenter is Catherine Collins. I see you. It says Katie, so I'll call you Katie.
Hello.
Time's yours.
Can you hear me now?
We sure can. Thank you.
Thank you for the time this morning. I am also a local resident in Southeast Aurora, living adjacent to the Aurora Reservoir in the Beacon Point community. And I would like for this commission to please include in your cumulative impact assessment all the actions that we can do to prioritize the protection of public health, safety, welfare, and the environment and the regulation of the oil and gas industry, both generally across all projects you're reviewing, and specifically for my interest, the Lowry CAP plan, especially a cumulative impact assessment that really focuses a full 360 around all of the issues that can impact water in terms of water usage, water resources, water and liquid storage, water quality and contamination. First, with water usage, the cumulative impact assessment should really and exactly quantify how many gallons of water will be used by each project, especially the Lowry CAP. Each, as you well know, each hydraulically fractured well requires millions of gallons of water. What would be the specific impact of withdrawal of that large amount of water from municipal sources? We understand from reading research and EPA documentation, the majority of the water used in hydraulic fracturing is actually fresh water. And reuse only represents 5% of fracturing water nationwide. Some estimates have said then with the 164 planned wells in the Lowry CAP, that is approximately 3.9 billion gallons of fresh water that's used. As an example, the entire capacity of the Aurora Reservoir at 100% is only 10 billion gallons. In summertime, it often runs down to 80% or 8 billion. So could we afford to permanently use 4 billion gallons or 50% of the water supply from the Aurora Reservoir as an example? And then also consider, that drawdown of water resources, especially in Western states like Colorado, where water resources are scarce, and that large withdrawals in the face of climate change may never be replaced by nature. And in breaking news today, the White House is planning to further restrict water usage in the 7 Western states, including Colorado. So water usage should be a key focus of the cumulative impact assessment. Water resources, in my own Aurora water billing statement, I received an information in the insert from the city of Aurora that drought is predicted for 2023, and that plans are being made now for further water restrictions and potentially rate hikes. How would a large draw from our water supply impact our already high water prices and further reduce the supply and impact those of all incomes, but especially disproportionately the lower income customers of Aurora City Water? In terms of water and liquid storage, I think the cumulative impact assessment should study where will fracking wastewater be stored. Many times it's done in open pits. In the case that it's so close to residential areas, that's a concern, due to air quality. In other cases, it's transported and ultimately disposed of. So the assessment should quantify the probability of spills of fracturing fluids and what is the risk of those spills in terms of contamination. Another EPA estimate says that you could plan for one spill for every 100 wells in Colorado and up to 12 spills for every 100 wells in Pennsylvania. So given that, for the CAP plan with 164 wells, there could be anywhere from 1 to 20 spills, depending on which well has the spill and where it is in reference to upstream, downstream from water sources. That is a big concern as a local resident. In terms of water quality and contamination, what is the cumulative impact assessment study on the probability of fracturing directly into underground drinking water sources? And how would below ground migration of toxic liquids and gases flow into our clean water supply? Below ground drinking water resources are meant to be separated from the production well through cement casing. However, the cement casing can fail, and when the casing does fail, toxic fracking fluid can flow into the underground water supply. As an example, here in Colorado, the Mam Creek gas field in Colorado, inadequate cement was placed around a production well that allowed methane and benzene to migrate along the production well flow through natural faults and fractures to drinking water resources. And so I'd like to better understand what is the probability that this would happen in future CAPs, especially the Lowry CAP. And for all CAPs, especially the Lowry CAP, has the team considered engaging resources from USGS, Colorado School of Mines, International Groundwater Modeling Center to conduct a full geologic study of natural faults and fractures under the reservoir that could serve as pathways for contamination in the event that a casing does fail. And then, of course, as mentioned by the previous speaker from South Shore, we need to do a full cumulative assessment on the chemical, physical, and toxicological properties of the hydraulic fracturing chemical additives in the likely chance they will make it to our water supply. With the air quality also concern around toxic air pollution, chemicals that can cause long-term health effects like childhood leukemia, cardiac problems, birth defects. With all the chemicals that are known and unknown, many known to cause cancer, many are classified as forever chemicals that can never be diluted or removed from the soil.
Thanks, Ms. Collins. Sorry to interrupt you, but I'd wanted to recognize Ms. Larson there quickly.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Collins. We have asked folks to keep their comments to around 3 minutes. You're going on about 8 minutes now. If you do have written comments that you'd like to submit, Ms. Hickam has put an email address in the chat that you can also submit those written comments to.
That was the end of my comment.
Thanks, Ms. Larson, and thank you, Ms. Collins. We're grateful to have you here today and appreciate your comments. And wanted to reiterate Ms. Larson's comments that written comment can continue to be submitted to us as well. Appreciate you being here with us. Thank you so much. Commissioners and other panelists, any points of clarification from Ms. Collins? All right, thank you so much. Our next commenter is Janessa Salgado.
So I'm not seeing Janessa Salgado on the attendees list.
So Ms. Salgado, if you're there, if you can please raise your hand and we'll seek to locate you. In the meantime, we'll go ahead and continue on to our next and final signed up commenter, Kevin Chan.
Okay, I've just promoted him, Kevin. Oh, there he goes.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chan, can you hear us?
Yeah, I hear you.
All right, please, we can see you as well. So go ahead. You have 3 minutes for your comments.
Yes, my name is Kevin Chan. I have recently just started getting into oil and gas. So I've been watching a lot of the testimonies and the application hearings, things like that. So I'm just trying to, wrap my head around everything you guys say and do. But I'm speaking as a concerned resident as with cumulative impacts. When I take a look at some of the historical data around spills and air quality, I noticed that, this year alone, we've increased the oil and gas fields have increased the spills by about 30%, 29%. And just seeing everybody talk about excavation of dirt and stuff like that, what goes through my mind is that a lot of this may be runoff from rain and just surface erosion. So I want to know about some of the cumulative impacts that may happen into our streams and rivers where these well sites may be located. I'm particularly concerned, as many of my other Southeast Aurora residents are pointing out, that there's a cap that's being applied for and around the Aurora Reservoir. We know that erosion is probably, and surface spills are one of the largest causes of ground contamination, especially with the Aurora Reservoir being mostly surface water. Surface spills will definitely impact that. I also want to talk about, raise the concern about air quality monitoring. I'm taking a look at the air quality monitoring on this government website. I only see one air monitoring station near the Aurora Reservoir, when we know that the Box Elder Cap, with its 100 and something wells being permitted in, I think, November, why there aren't any stations over there and why we're depending on operator reported data. What happens if there's a leak and the government needs to pretty much put out a notice, hey, you guys should stay indoor. There's a high concentration of benzene leaking out of one of the wells or something like that. Like, I think as a resident, as a father, as people just watching kids, reading the research and just seeing that kids and elderly are highly impacted, and people with health risks that are more impacted at this. We're relying on operators to say, hey, everybody, you guys need to, shelter in place for now, when there may have been a leak for about 1 to 2, 3 hours without anybody raising any flags. So I want a real-time system in cumulative impacts so that these communities know what's going on with their air and their water. I've also read through some of your cumulative impact reports that there were only 8 sites that were kind of taken into evaluation. So I'm really looking for the 2023 report to be released this February and seeing if additional substance will be provided in that report, so that I can clearly judge how this is going to affect me and the community. I thank you guys for your time. Thank you for listening to my comments.
You bet, and thank you, Mr. Chan, for providing them, and thank you for your engagement and for being involved in this process, as well as the issues surrounding oil and gas development. Any points of clarification that anyone on the panel would like to ask of Mr. Chan? Ms. Fury, please go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner Ackerman, and thank you, Mr. Chan, for your comments. So each operator that drills prior or after May of 2021, so all future development, is required to do the pre-production monitoring that you mentioned. In addition, the division has a series of monitoring assets that we can deploy as needed to these sites. It's difficult for the Lowry Cap because Civitas has withdrawn that application, so I can't speak directly to that plan and what our monitoring plans are for that. but we have done extensive monitoring in the city of Aurora and Arapahoe County around oil and gas development using our mobile trailer as well as our mobile monitoring vans. So it is something that we are watching, and I recognize that there's lots of concerns about the Lowry cap, and I look forward to working with you and other residents in that area. And if you have questions about our air monitoring technology or any other, assets that we deploy on a regular basis or what we do with that information, I'm happy to follow up with you offline.
Thank you, Ms. Fury. Appreciate that. Any other points from anyone on the panel? Thank you. And again, thank you, Mr. Chan, for your comments. Ms. Hickam, were we able to locate Ms. Salgado?
We were not. We think that she must have left the building or the chat.
Okay, thank you so much. So that concludes the commenters that we had signed up for today's meeting. I think Mr. Chan did a great job of summing up that this is a complex issue. Cumulative impacts means a lot of things to a lot of different people. And these meetings will be really important to help us kind of get our heads around where you are on this issue. So I certainly would encourage you to participate in the path forward here. We do have a meeting next Monday, January 30th at 6 p.m. And we have another meeting after that on the 3rd of February at 10 a.m., followed by our final scheduled meeting on the 6th of February at 10 a.m. The intent of these meetings, again, is to listen and to scope and to help craft a path forward and assess the issues that are raised during these meetings for inclusion. Certainly, we'll refine the next steps of the process as we get our arms around the issues that are submitted. And I wanted to make a point that we are definitely not prejudging the outcome of this process. As I mentioned when I announced the process, could be rulemaking, maybe it won't be. It could be policy changes, forms, administrative issues, administrative procedures, et cetera. And so we are not limiting or prejudging what issues are being raised here. And again, the intent ultimately is to make some recommendations to the commission at the end of this process on cumulative impacts. I wanted to encourage further written comments. As I pointed out earlier, Ms. Hickam pasted some contacts into the chat box. You can also find those on our website. And I also wanted to encourage further verbal comments at our subsequent meetings. And remember, you can sign up in the form that we've got online for potential further personal participation in this process should it become necessary. Again, I wanted to remind everybody that the comments that we are hoping for at these meetings will be related to cumulative impacts, and appreciate those comments that were made here today. And we do have other public comment links on our website for other issues. If you have those, please take a look at our website and see if you can find the proper location. If not, give us a call and we can help you along the way. With that, I wanted to go ahead and conclude by asking Director Murphy if there's anything that she has to conclude for us. I see her shaking her head no. So again, wanted to thank you for being here, and that'll be the conclusion of our meeting today. And we'll see you again, hopefully on the 30th of January next Monday.